Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic. And let's begin. Part 3. One of the Nemodian leaders leaned closer to other and whispered few words into its ear. The second leader nodded impressed and pointed something on the hologram, and at same time, a whole company of clones were blown up. Separatist leaders clapped their hands like it was a play. The droid ignored them and quickly made his way through the crowd to the table that was placed onto a low platform which had a better view of the room. It lowered the tray on the table and turned to face the man sitting behind it. Anything else, Master? Blonde Roian-looking man shook his head and the droid bowed stiffly before stepping next to the chair to its place. As the man took a pair of chopsticks and his food, couple Nemodians made their way to the low platform. General Grievous's tactics are superb, my lord. Count Dooku will surely be most pleased to hear that our droid factories are safe and the Republic army nearly annihilated. Part 1. It was a typical calm day in the Jedi Temple of Coruscant in Core Worlds. Halls were filled with people of all species from young to old. Small children hurried together for their lessons. Old masters spent time teaching the future generations or did their research in the Jedi archives. Then there were those who weren't too old or too young who walked together mostly in pairs. Just like one particular pair of women. Young pink-haired Padawan and her blonde master stormed through the temple like they were searching for something. Tsunade Senju was muttering angrily to herself when she walked through corridors. She decisively, even though she didn't know where to go, and she would have continued going so had she not heard a voice calling for her. Please, calm down, master. She turned around so quickly with her glare that when she looked into her Padawan's eyes, the young girl froze to her place. The pink-haired girl recovered quickly though, this hadn't been the first time. There is no need to be so angry, master. She began with the pleading voice. I'm sure they have a reasonable explanation why they weren't. Tsunade stopped her with a huff, but it sounded like a steam coming from a broken pipe. Sakura could actually see some steam coming from the nostrils. Yeah, right. Probably lying in their beds recovering from hangover. You're the one to talk. Sakura's sweat dropped uncomfortably when Tsunade's glare hardened. Don't group me with them, Padawan. I'm never that drunk without a good reason. She snapped and continued her search. They were supposed to report to the council hours ago. Where are they? She glared around so fiercely that few younglings started crying and leaned closer to a Jedi master who had been escorting them. Old Bothan man glared back and tried to offer some comfort to children. She shrugged apologetically before hurrying away. Sakura sighed and tightened her own fist. She was so going to beat the crap out of that idiot friend of hers. She had to take the heat from her master because he couldn't handle his master and they weren't where they should be. Are you alright, Padawan? She shot a familiar glare over her shoulder she must have inherited from her master, and another pair of people took a step back, their arms raised in calming gesture. Anakin Skywalker and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi were right behind her. You still haven't found them. It took a second from the pink girl to remember that one of them was a master. She cleared her throat and lowered her head. No, we haven't. Have you checked their rooms? Anakin suggested and regretted when Sakura's eyes flamed up again. Just suggesting. He stepped back hastily. This girl was so much like her master that it was scary. Especially when she got angry. Sometimes it was like Padawan would grow into a copy of one's master. Speaking of one such pair. Meanwhile, Tsunade made her way through corridors and searched for place where particular master and Padawan might be. She would randomly yell into vents, visit girls' bathrooms, anywhere the two might be, but there was no sight of either of them. Master, or the Padawan. It was like they weren't in the temple at all. Gitchy gitchy ya ya da da. Hey hey hey. Gitchy gitchy ya ya he. Hero. Maca chocolata ya ya. Ooh yeah. Creole lady marmalade. Ooh, couldn't you pick something else? A boy asked through his grin. Shootoop. Ladies love this. An old man hissed back and leaned away from his microphone as much younger lady friend closer to in turn and started signing. Same happened with the boy. What? Ooh oh. Then everyone took a hold of the mics and song in chorus. Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? Voulez-vous coucher avec moi? Right then the boy was about to lean closer to the microphone he was sharing with a lovely female felicat who giggled when they, accidentally, touched each other's hands, when his communicator activated again and started peeping. Damn it. He yelled angrily and his yell was magnified by the microphone so it echoed through the karaoke bar. There were humored snorts from the audience. Didn't you turn that off already? Jiraiya growled to his Padawan angrily as he was forced to look away from the ample chest falling. I did. Twice. But it just keeps turning back on. Minato Namikaze stepped off the stage, holding his communicator. It has some stupid self-activation code. Jiraiya followed him and snapped it away from his hands. Yeah, they give these to Padawans so they can be contacted even when they are in trouble. The muttered angrily. They better have a damn good reason to bother us like this. Sorry ladies, duty calls. He shrugged to disappointed-looking girls who pouted cutely, trying to get them to stay, and both master and apprentice really wished that they could, but if the temple was this desperate to contact them, it really must be important. Minato can stay and play with us, right? His date purred cutely and leaned closer, taking his hand into her own. Like an official playboy, he took her hand back into his and looked right into her eyes. His blue eyes drilled into her very soul. I wish I could stay too, baby. But the galaxy needs me now. To be ripped away from you is my cursed fate, but I promise my darling cat, if I survive, I will find you. Then he gently kissed her hands and let them go. The feline nearly fainted when all the blood rushed into her face. Jiraiya wiped tears away from the corner of his eye. I'm so proud. Then he sighed sadly. They grow up so fast. It was like just yesterday when he was screaming how disgusting I am, and now he is picking them up like a master. He looked at the roof and the lights that were installed, trying to imagine that it was an open sky. I guess it's only normal for the next generation to overcome the last. Yet it makes me so sad. Hey, old pervert, let's go. The boy slapped him into his back playfully, but it hurt more than it intended to. Minato stretched his arms and blinked his eyes when they stepped out of the dark bar. It's so bright already. How long did we stay in that bar, anyway? Jiraiya checked his watch and raised an eyebrow. You don't wanna know. Really? Let's just hope they didn't miss us that much. Jiraiya whispered as he activated the communicator. CKING idiot. Keep your ZZZKING communicator on so people can contact you when you're actually needed, you filthy ZKING pervert. Jiraiya closed the link. Minato and Jiraiya watched each other for a moment. You know what? I think I forgot my valet into that bar. Really? The Padawan nodded. Let's go. They re-entered the bar that they had just exited, hoping to hide there forever. So let's get this straight. Mace Windu leaned back, raised his fingers against each other and shot a doubtful glare at the two standing in the middle of the room. You were chasing a group of criminals that had stolen a bank. They lured you into the lower levels where you were forced to fight your way to these criminals. Exactly. Jiraiya nodded firmly. After we had faced 500 enemies, we were overpowered and taken to some holding cell. And then I managed to use my affinity with rats and got them to eat the wires of the control panel, after which we sneaked through. Minato continued the story. Several members of the council groaned frustrated as the two fabricated the most believably unbelievable story of why they had been so late and out of touch. These two were masters at bullshitting others, if at nothing else. Enough. Mace Windu growled a little louder than he had intended to. We can talk about your heroics later. Now, there are more urgent matters to discuss about. Okay. Jiraiya sighed relieved and tugged his hands into his sleeves. Shoot. You can read details later because you were so late. There is a planet called Jiraran V which is currently in the verge of a civil war between two sides. Senator Rory of Jiraran has asked for our help. Who else are on this mission? Tsunade Senju and her Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan. 6 Jedi, isn't that a going overboard? Minato blurted out and received angry glares from the masters. He only looked at his own master who shrugged back. Jiraran hold great importance to the Galactic Senate. Eth Koth explains. There have already been skirmishes between the royal house and the rebels. Any attempts to negotiate peace have failed. Jiraiya closed his eyes before glancing at his Padawan. What do you think? Minato took a deep breath and closed his eyes, very much like his master had just a moment ago. I think that they want us to go undercover with these rebels and seek their leaders and then see if we can get the general idea what the problem is. Some of the masters nodded back impressed, reluctantly. That's what I think too. Almost but not quite. Yoda interrupted. Heard disturbing news we have. There is a rumor that either side is trying to hire outsider to solve the conflict. Windu continued and looked at Jiraiya. Master Jiraiya, you need to find what you can about this rumor while your Padawan tries to infiltrate the rebel forces. Meanwhile Masters Tsunade and Obi-Wan will try to prevent anything from happening on their own levels. Why don't we just lock them into a room until they talk, like always? Minato asked. Masters shot disapproving glares at the young Padawan again for such disrespectful behavior, but his own master beat them before they could say anything. These guys must think that there's something more to this than just two sides that hate each other, right? He looked at Mace Windu. That's why they brought me in. That's what we wish you to find out. Ki-Adi Mundi nodded. More and more conflicts, in galaxy there are. Yoda pointed out. More and more Jedi needed to solve them or too. Careful both of you should be. Clouded the future is. We thank you masters and shall be on our way. Jiraiya bowed and pushed Minato's head forward to ensure that he would too. Remember, the situation is extremely delicate and even the slightest mistake might set off a civil war and millions of lives will be at stake. Windu added looking at the two. Senator Rory has shown indication that the royal family is preparing to subdue them, one way or the other. May the force be with you. Yoda said slowly. Jiraiya and Minato left the council chamber. As the doors closed safely behind them, a distasteful silence filled the room. I don't like this. Shakti said the thing in everyone's mind. That boy is growing more and more reckless by the day. I don't think we should trust this mission to him. For the sake of the mission and himself. I agree. Plo Koon nodded. Arrogance, emotional and insolence are his great faults. But he is strong. Mace Windu interrupted and pressed his fingers each other, trying to arrange his thoughts. And his power keeps growing every ping day. As does his recklessness. And his skills with a lightsaber are undeniable. Saci Tin added. He is the one of the few members of the order who actually managed to master Vaapad, before creating his own style. Amount of those who can beat him is thinning by the day. And he is cunning. Shakti pressed on again. I witnessed his skills during that mission to Roche. His tactics and cunningness impressed even me. And to watch closely, I challenged him into a Daharak. I don't know if it's his training with Jiraiya or what, but he really has a mind of his own. But he knows his skills to be exceptional, which results this arrogance. Plo Koon pointed out. But he is dedicated. Adi Gallia argued, giving the boy some defense. He trains harder than any of his peers. And he spends hours to help others in their studies. And he is inspiring and popular among other Padawans and younglings. Even among some masters. She glanced at Depa Balaba. The woman nodded back. His dedication for others is truly inspiring. And he never ceases to amaze me how he can connect with other students and with the living force. And he was able to master Vaapad just from looking others. That's simply amazing. She smiled slightly. I've spent some time with the boy and he truly is one of a kind. And this isn't his first infiltration IGN meant either. Ki-Adi Mundi nodded. I agree that he takes some of his masters, habits as his own, but so far he has proven himself to be an excellent Padawan. He rubbed his chin. He has many strengths but also many weaknesses. Hard to read indeed. But there is still something that bothers me. Shakti started again. I don't have anything personal against the boy, but, she sighed. I don't like this. At all. Yoda opened his eyes. On a dangerous path, young Minato walks. Choose he shall, if a Jedi he wants to be. To force anyone we will not. But we cannot allow him to wander off to the galaxy by himself, untrained. Not when there's Siths lurking in the shadows. Coleman Trebor pointed out. It would be just too risky to have him to turn to dark. What do you suppose we do then? Plo Koon asked, and the uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. Trust in Force, we must. Yoda said finally. Another master, teach him could. That could work. Deppa nodded. After they return from this mission, I volunteer to teach him, if no one else wishes it. Many of the masters considered it seriously. Minato was a genius in making even if they didn't ever admit out loud, and another teacher might be the exact thing he needed to grow as a Jedi. But many already had Padawans. Deppa Balaba was luckily without one. And she already had a small connection with the boy. Are you sure you can handle him? Mace Windu asked carefully. We can't expect him to take this, IGN meant calmly. He might rebel very loudly. I believe what he needs now is a different kind of guidance. She nodded. I can provide that guidance. Then it's decided. Padawan Namikaze will be ignorant to you when they return. Will it be only temporarily or permanent will be decided later. Agreed. Everyone nodded in agreement when the suitable choice was presented. Perhaps now they could all rest in ease. But for some reason, they still had a bad feeling about all this. Explain to me, why did they give us this mission again, perverted master? Minato asked as they walked through corridors, preparing for departure. Why? I thought it was obvious. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. And don't call me that. It's embering. I know that it was because it's kind of what we do best. Jiraiya was famous for his skills in information gathering and infiltration, and he had taught all that to Minato, so this wouldn't be the first time he would infiltrate an enemy base. A piece of cake to someone with his abilities. Being a playboy had its perks, especially when you needed to assure everyone that you weren't a Jedi. But I remember that Fuzzy Eyebrow and Master Fuzzy Eyebrow are from Jiraran V, if I'm not completely wrong. Wouldn't it be easier for them to infiltrate their circles without causing too much suspicion? Jiraiya stopped and looked at his apprentice for a full minute. Okay. I know it was a pretty stupid idea in the first place. The boy mumbled as the master nodded approvingly, and they continued to walk. They would probably get themselves killed or most likely cause murder per meter suicide when they were screaming about their ideals. Jiraiya nodded and shuddered. And don't worry. Jirarans don't differ that much from humans. Right then a pair of green spandex suits jumped over them, with monkey-like agility. Maida Guy and his Padawan Rock Lee landed front of them. There, nice guy, poses ready. Good day, my youthful friends. How are you today? Master's voice echoed through corridors. Jiraiya twitched painfully when his ears seemed to give in. He saw how Minato had stuck his fingers into his ears from the start. Jiraran pair of Jedis ranted something incomprehensible until they jumped away. True enough, they appeared like normal humans with their clothes on, but Minato knew what was under it. Their body structure was very similar to many primitive primates. Instead of feet, they had another pair of hands suited for walking like monkeys. And they had a light fur covering their body, expect their faces. And they had tails. Yeah, Minato had no problems of pretending to be a Jiraran and infiltrate their camps. I like a challenge, he muttered to himself, and they continued their walk. No need to worry like that. Jiraiya urged him. 1/6 of Jirarans are humans, so you don't have to do anything excessive to blend in. I need to do few things before we go. Let's meet at the platform 3 in 2 hours. The boy nodded and they turned into different directions in the hallway. As he strolled around, he decided to see if there was anything to entertain he could use to entertain himself. Of course he could go and study more about his destination. Duty or pleasure, always so hard to decide. Maybe, he could try to fuse the two. But that would mean that he needed to go down to the archives. It would be such a drag. But there it would always be so easy to start some fun. He headed to the archives, even if he hated that place. 1. It always had too many masters watching it, so the chances of getting caught there were high. 2. It was so plain an open space, so hiding was difficult. And 3rd, it had too much information for young Minato, who always preferred more direct approach. With the exception of war history, nothing really interested him. But for now, he would see what he could do there. He arrived in big halls of the Jedi archives, probably the largest storage of recorded information in the galaxy. And to this young Padawan it wasn't anything more than big boring room with lots of bright lights. But not to arouse too much suspicion just yet, he sat front of a terminal and started pushing buttons. He bit his lips in frustration when nothing happened. Damn, he hated machines. Cold, lifeless pieces of shish. Can I help you, Padawan? He slowly looked up to see very agitated librarian Jocasta Nu standing behind him. Reason for her agitation was obvious. She was practically Minato's nemesis. This thing doesn't work, he complained loudly. Jocasta leaned over and pressed few buttons and the screen lit up. It appears to be perfectly fine to me. Are you sure you know how to use this? Minato rolled his eyes. Of course not. Not at all. Jocasta pressed her lips together into a thin line so she wouldn't snap at the boy. What kind of information are you inquiring, if I may ask? I'm looking information about Jiraran system. Jiraran, I see, I believe you're talking about this. In Arm Shua sector. Minato saw the information on the screen and nodded. Thanks. I believe I could use some privacy, you know, while I'm reading this. If you don't mind. He laughed nervously. Certainly. I'll be right around the corner if anything pops into your mind, young Padawan. She smiled sweetly and started walking away. Then after a step she turned around again and looked straight at him for a moment. What would he think he would see you now? Minato glanced over his shoulder. Who? He slowly narrowed his eyes. You know very well who I talk about. Jocasta sighed sufferingly. He always spoke so highly of you. Said that you would do great things one day. And I believed him back then. Now, all I can see is a great failure. He stormed away, leaving Minato glaring angrily after her. Well, good thing I never cared what you thought about me. He muttered and did his research for once. Jiraran V was a easy planet, meaning it didn't have any extremities like many planets had. It wasn't too cold or too hot. It didn't have thick jungles or excessive seas. It didn't have any excessively large predators or dangerous diseases. It didn't have large cities, but majority of Jirarans lived mostly in small colonies on top of the trees, spread through the planet. Still a good part of the population lived in modern cities near the capital. Terrain was mostly large plains and light forests that had been cut down recently. These loggings were one of the main arguments which had later brought the planet to the verge of civil war. The planet had two political leaders. King Rurs-Ri, older brother of their senator, Ror-Ri, and opposite leader, Chiriku. Out of all the endless lines of records, Minato was able to gather the basic problem. Two sides didn't like each other. Of course there were something about discrimination of some clans and argument about old versus new, crap and selling our souls and blah blah blah. Damn, this was boring stuff. He sighed when he closed the terminal. Or blew it up. He couldn't tell. It wasn't his fault that those stupid things didn't work around him. When he was finished, he wished to take revenge on that dinosaur for her comment but didn't know how. He couldn't do anything direct. That would just get him into more trouble and he couldn't afford to do that now. He would need to be sneaky. Even if he appeared to be just reckless idiot, he was actually pretty smart. Not book smart but cunning. And he was always aware of the consequences of his actions. Even if it meant that all his havoc was completely intentional and mostly turned out exactly he had planned. What could he say? He would get bored easily. He decided to go old school this time. Simple bucket of water hanging on the railing, and when his victim would walk under it. Okay, it was pretty lame plan, but he didn't feel like doing anything complicated. Simplest way is the best. And not a moment too soon, Jocasta knew was walking with few rowdy younglings who had dared to raise their voices inside the archives. Minato snorted. Those brats would do an excellent distraction. He was about to activate the plan when something touched his shoulder. I hope you are not planning anything, my friend. He sprung around to see Barris standing there, a disapproving frown on her face. Where did you come from? He almost screamed. Of all the people who had to catch him, I wasn't planning anything. Young Marilyn looked around quietly before firmly taking hold of his hand and dragging him away, not stopping or letting go when he tried to struggle. I wish I wouldn't have to do this. She sighed as she continued to drag him away through the temple. No, I was just about to start it. It was perfect. Simple but brilliant. Minato complained, but it was too late. She had managed to ruin everything. The bucket of water was floating away thanks by some ping master. I hope you're happy. He muttered, annoyed. She nodded calmly. Yes, I'm very happy, for keeping you out of trouble. They strolled around the temple, aimlessly, chatting about their experiences since their last meeting. It felt like they had less and less time together. True, Minato was popular among his friends. But he only had a handful of people he truly called friends. And Barris was on top of that list. So, now my master thinks I should go and do some stupid infiltration mission. So boring, he explained when he leaned on the railing on the temple roof. I believed you enjoyed these missions, am I wrong? Barris asked while removing her hood, letting her black hair wave in the wind. You have a bad habit of seeking excitement in a ways a Jedi shouldn't. Minato just pouted childishly and looked away. Barris held back a giggle and playfully nudged his side. He looked at her surprised. What? She only smiled and leaned to the railing as well. Nothing. I just wish that we could have more time rather than just a couple of hours. Minato snorted. And I feel like I have too much free time. I guess that proves that my master and I are more respectful than yours and you. She showed a playful grin to Minato's annoyance, and he was about to retaliate when his communicator flashed. It was time. He growled angrily and glared at Barris. I will make you pay for that when I get back. He started walking away and she was pulling her hood up when she felt something touching her butt. She let out a very out-of-character squeal and turned around to see Minato smirking impishly. Try to get some figure while I'm away, would you? Not that I don't mind touching your body now. He laughed perversely and she felt herself blushing, and not only out of emberment. That feeling made her act very out of character again by trying to slap his face hard, but he had expected this and dodged her swing easily, his grin widening. So imagine his shock when he felt a shocking pain right on the cheek. The blow had been so powerful that he had landed on his back. Ow! He screamed while holding his face. When the sudden pain subdued quickly, he looked up to Barris' smirking face, shocked and surprised. When you get back from this mission, we will deal with that attitude of yours. Women are not objects for your amusement. She nodded firmly and started walk away from the roof. Minato grumbled something to himself and followed her. When they were at the doorway, she stopped suddenly that they almost crashed and looked right into his eyes. Promise me you will return, all right? The boy raised an eyebrow. Where did that come from? Marilyn girl looked away uncomfortably. Nothing. It was just this feeling. Bad feeling about this mission. Minato looked at her for a second, seeming to be very serious. Then he snorted and fought back laughter before he started laughing loudly. Bad feeling. He laughed and stood up, drying some tears that were falling down his face. Then he noticed that she hadn't moved at all or changed her impression. If anything, more serious than before. Her blue eyes drilling into his. Promise me, she repeated, this time a bit more forcefully. He finally stopped laughing and stood up straight. Fine, I promise. And I even promise to take you to this bar me and my master found. Then he stepped forward, vigorously, and before she could stop him, he planted a kiss on her lips. To his surprise, she didn't pull away or even try to slap him like she would usually do. But in fact, she leaned closer. They stood there, lips locked together. Wind circling them as they slowly stepped closer to each other. Slowly, his hands wrapped around her body, pulling her closer, and she took her hands into back of his head, brushing the hair. He pushed her against the door and they kept kissing. Their lips pressing against each other. He could smell her skin. Feel her life. He could sense her thoughts, the warmth and happiness she was now radiating. Then he slowly licked her lips and he could feel her flinching all around her body, but then, her mouth cracked open, allowing entry for his tongue. Their wet tongues tangled, and she felt excitement like never before. She wished they could stay there. Remain on the rooftop where the winds were clear and life seemed to lose its meaning. It was like there was nothing but the two of them. And then both their communicators started peeping and flashing and they broke apart. She quickly pulled away and took her communicator. Yes, Master. What is it? Padawan, Luminara's voice was heard. We have just been summoned by the council. I will be waiting for you before the chamber. I will be there immediately, Master. Barris closed the link and quickly tried to pull herself together and calm down. She could hear her own heartbeat and feel herself sweating uncontrollably. Had I known you were this good, I would have done this long ago. She turned around to see Minato laughing there. Wanna do it again? He asked, smirking confidently. For some reason, she felt herself coming angry all of a sudden. He had made sound like they had just trained lightsaber use. She huffed angrily and stormed off the roof. What? Some other time then? Minato asked lightly, but she didn't answer. Slowly, Minato's smirk fell off his face like a hand that had been holding it had let go. Why did you stop us? He asked slowly. Jiraiya stepped from around the corner looking uncharacteristically serious. Why you think I did that? Even though Luminara's call had been a pure coincidence, he had called with a single intent. Minato touched his lips before shooting a hard glare at his master. You think that I might be doing something I shouldn't, even though I didn't do anything different from what you did and encourage me to do all the time. Jiraiya shook his head. No, you didn't. And you know this. There's a difference between letting loose and playing with one's feelings. Barris will be fine. Minato waved his hand. She might be easy to wave, but she is pretty solid from the inside. I mean you, my Padawan. The master walked back to the edge of the roof. You know why I took you as my Padawan, don't you? Because I kept pestering you until you did. Minato answered, and Jiraiya chuckled. There were other reasons. But I know that I did the right call. But one of those reasons was that you remind me of someone's. There it was again. That unexplained sadness and sorrow that sometimes flashed through his master's eyes when they talked about the past. Then he cleared his throat and turned around, hiding his face. You and I are from the same branch. And I too was young. About a millennium ago. Minato muttered, but Jiraiya ignored it. And I remember what it was like to be first time in love. And I too have ventured on the edge of failure. When the boy was about to argue, he raised his hand to calm him. Failure is a matter of perspective. One man's failure is others' success. One's defeat is others' victory. One's curse is others' gift. He turned to look into Minato's eyes. You are strong, Minato, very strong. And before you get why and ahead of yourself, it's not a good thing if you don't know how to control it. You are not only strong in Jedi arts, but you also feel strongly. Like you feel strongly for Barris. I do not. He tried to argue, but Jiraiya ignored him again. It's nothing to be ashamed of, not in my book at least. Every kid has a first love, and most often it's someone very close to you. Those feelings are human. And even if we often try to act more than that, we are not. Every one of us is a human being. A member of their own species. We live, and as we live, we meet people. As we meet people, we will develop feelings. When we develop feelings, we will plan our actions accordingly. When we act, something happens. As that happens, it will result in outcome. Sometimes it's good, sometimes bad. That's not important. It's how we act after that outcome. Do you understand? Minato tilted his head and slit his eyes. I'm not sure. I might have. Jiraiya smiled. Others might have lost hope, but I have not. Remember, my young Padawan, you will always have my ear, so use it. And if you can't, just think twice before doing anything. If you fall, pick yourself up and start again. That's my lesson today. And a millennium just passed. Minato yawned. Did you actually have something to talk about, or did you just call to stop me and Barris from moving forward? Well, it was a nice day, and I thought, Jiraiya muttered sarcastically. What the hell do you think? We should be leaving already. Oh, yeah, we have a mission. Things have a tendency to fall out of my head when I'm enjoying myself. He smirked. Things fall of your head because there's nothing to holding them in. It was the final strategy meeting before Minato and Jiraiya would depart. Do you know where you start? Tsunade asked from the pair. They were in a spaceport where people were running around hastily, boarding a freighter that was ready to leave. Sure, I'll just drop myself in the middle of the rebel capital and see from there. Minato nodded. And I will just follow my leads the way I can and see from there. Jiraiya nodded. Obi-Wan shared a look with Tsunade. I'm sorry, but I don't think the rest of us share your optimism. That's because you two and your Padawans don't understand just how awesome me and my Padawan really are. High five. Jiraiya held his hand high and Minato met with a slap. Anyway, we have divided our responsibilities. Master Tsunade will head to Jiraran capital and tries to open the negotiations in there. I will see what I can do with this senator. Perhaps if the royal family is open to negotiations, the war could be averted. So, I guess this is goodbye for now. Minato said as he exited the transport to a busy loading dock. He would first take a public transport to one of the other worlds in Armshua sector, and from there he onwards to Jiraran V. Try not to get yourself killed or ruin this whole mission. Sakura sighed painfully. Please. You're not gonna let me live that one time down ever, are you? He muttered. It was a simple mistake. Anybody could mistake that one. You maybe. Sakura muttered bitterly. I don't see how anyone else could. What happened? Anakin asked. This idiot. Sakura began. Don't worry about it. Minato screamed. It was nothing. Anyway, try to keep yourself in check while I'm away. It would ring if you got yourself hurt. Anakin, even though jealous of his peer who was trusted a mission like this on his own, held his hand out and they shook. Obi-Wan was especially pleased of this. Anakin didn't make friends easily, and having someone like Minato was exactly what his young Padawan needed. An equal in many ways, superior in some ways, yet inferior in other obvious ways. An easy person like Minato who didn't really care about others' opinions had been a good friend for Anakin for years, which Master Kenobi appreciated, especially since the rift that appeared between his friends, True Veldon, around a year ago. He was generally disappointed in Minato's progress. We'll see in a week or so. Anakin answered to the Sheikh. So don't get yourself killed. I heard that they are already having small fights down there, so watch yourself. Minato stepped to the line that was slowly moving into the freighter. Jiraiya walked by his side but out of the line. Remember, Minato, the first thing you have to do when you land. Always think an exit strategy first. The boy nodded, his excitement starting to show. And also remember the 3 things you should never do on a mission. Fall in love, forget who you are, and don't get yourself killed. Then it was his turn to enter the ship. See you later, Master. Don't worry too much. See you later, Master. Don't worry too much. A voice yelled and Jiraiya's eyes widened in shock. He closed them suddenly and rubbed them like he had woken up and opened them again. Minato was gone already. Master Jiraiya, is something wrong? Kenobi asked. The white-haired man shook his head. No, nothing. Just a little tired. Well, I need to head out too. See you lot later. He waved his hand and disappeared into another crowd. Kenobi looked back from the disappearing man to the old healing master who had a pained look on her face. Master Tsunade. Tsunade sighed. It's not my place to say anything, but this reminded us of something that happened long time ago. She tried to shake off the feeling, but she too was starting to have a bad feeling about this. Part 2. How is this? Having small fight. Minato screamed. He hid behind a pile of rubble when a blaster fire almost gave him another hole into his head. This is a hell-on start for the day. He yelled and rolled into more appropriate cover as the blaster fire kept bounding his hiding place. Minato was currently in the rebel capital of Jiraran V, Rariki's intergalactic spaceport. Or what was left of it. He had got off from the big freighter on some port in Armshua sector. From there he had gotten lucky and found a small frigate used by Jiraran rebels to carry supplies to their troops. It hadn't been hard to sneak in, disguised as one of the several helping teenage rebels who were carrying crates. They were so disorganized and numerous that it was impossible for anyone to keep a strict record of everyone. So when no one was looking, he had taken a crate and started carrying it around, using it as a cover. First, Minato had observed the rebels and how they dressed and such. Most of them wore some kind of cloaks with clan markings. Natives didn't wear much under it. Male natives wore nothing but loin clothing, vest and few beautiful belts across their chest. The few females that had come here wore just something wrapped around their chest and then a short pants, getting a full use of their tails. Many of them wore something wrapped around their heads, giving them a slight exotic look. Both men and women wore cloaks, but not everyone did. There was some CL difference between those who wore cloaks and those who didn't, but also among the people who wore the cloaks. It was very complicated. Many wore jewelry too. Only difference between what natives and humans wore was that they wore many belts, giving an impression of a shirt, and women wore dresses instead of short pants. Other way to point natives from humans was when natives kept jumping on top of the crates while loading them and used tails to help in their jobs. He also noticed that many wore bandages around their bodies. As Minato strolled around the rebel hangar, he found a crate full of clothes that were sent to the planet. He rampaged it quickly and found himself a good disguise, put them on quickly. He even went as far as copied how many of the other teenagers wore their clothes. When he couldn't find anything useful to cover his face, he then took a roll of bandage he carried with himself, mostly to help him disguise himself rather than actually use it to tie wounds, wrapped it around his lower face and took a crate which was closest and started carrying it towards the frigate. He joined the lines of rebels who were carrying crates. When foremen had seen him, they had only hurried him, saying they didn't have all day, not seeing anything unusual about him or even really noticing him. He hastened his pace quickly and tried to act like he was in the greatest of hurry. One of basic skills of infiltration. If you are seen, make sure that you are seen when you appear to be busy. People avoided of disturbing those who seemed to be busy. So until he found a place to hide himself, Minato had run around, carrying crates, organized them like crazy, making sure that he didn't stand out too much. When someone leaned closer to whisper something, he acted like he listened and nodded in agreement. He even waved his hand to few other kids and men who hurriedly waved back. Then, the frigate was loaded and ready to leave. Minato had discreetly hid himself into a vent. He still found them to be the safest place in the ships and buildings, and started doing some quick recon. He had found out many things. Like that, even though the many of the supplies they carried were indeed food and medicine to help others, most of them were weapons and ammo. And judging from the symbols in the containers, they were top of the line, Trade Federation approved. These guys were seriously preparing for war. He also found out that not many people cared even to consider talking with the royalists. Too many insults, like some of them put it. Minato knew what he needed to look into more. The trip didn't take long and he wandered around the vents and cabins, getting the general idea who were on board and why. Most of them were kids from very young to mid-teens. Only a handful of grown-ups were among them. He found out that most of the grown-ups hadn't got the chance to leave their posts unguarded, so children had to take responsibility for supplies. When he briefly visited the medical bay, he realized how many of the children were wounded and how seriously. Perhaps the skirmishes were a tad more serious than he had originally believed. Then they had started landing, and just when Minato was about to join others in the loading bay to help others to unload the cargo, the ship suddenly came crashing down. Minato had been part of space battles more than enough that he knew when the ship was being bombarded. The ship had crash-landed on top of the port. They hadn't been too high, so they didn't suffer too many casualties, but the Minato saw how people started panicking inside the ship. He could hear clearly words, bastards, and those damn royalists, until it started to change. The ship had damaged enough so it had several cracks in it, so people started pushing others outside. Adults cracked open the boxes and crates and started handing guns and ammo to kids who charged outside, hardly knowing how to use them. Smallest and most wounded were told to unload the food and medicine. Minato was starting to think what he should do when someone threw a gun into his lap. "There you go, kid. Go get some royalists." The man tapped his shoulder encouragingly before starting to throw more weapons into kid's hands. Minato glanced at his new weapon. It was a brand new E6 blaster rifle. Modified version of the ones that the battle droids used. It was longer, so it was more fit into hands of humans. And it was more accurate. When he felt a push on his back, he glanced over his shoulder. A kid Jiraran, not more than 10 years old surely, was shaking terribly but had a determined look on his face. "Go," the child told angrily. "What am I getting myself into?" Minato had thought as he lowered his head when he charged out of a hole into the sunny outside. He had been in battle before. Not this grand, but he knew the basics. First one should find cover. So he found the first corner of the destroyed port he could and dived in. He could feel shots following his footsteps. When safe, secondly, ETS the situation. When he found a corner where he wasn't immediately fired at, he took some time to look around. The spaceport was in the middle of the city that lied in the middle of the large plains. That's about what he had found out from the data he had collected at the temple. The city itself was a typical city with a spaceport with its large buildings, several species and lots of people running around. Expect those buildings were ruined and people who run around were firing at each other. All the buildings seemed to have many ledges and such, so agile Jirarans could climb them. Even now, many soldiers and rebels used those ledges to places as position. He saw how many kids and adults dressed similarly to him, formed something that resembled a line behind a fallen beams and walls and pile of rubble. The main building material seemed to be a light green rock and brown wood. Rebels kept firing into the direction Minato had turned his back to. So slowly, he lowered his body and took a sneak peek, and his heart sank. What he saw was a battalion of professional-looking soldiers in fine armor, good formation, being supported by a couple tanks and led by an important wannabe officer holding his hand towards the enemy. Them. No mercy for the enemies of the crown. He yelled before quickly covering behind a visible shield. His soldiers all cried their war cries and charged. "Stay here." Rebel leader, a native Jiraran man with a red bandana, middle-aged, armed with a single-shot rifle. "Don't let them any closer. Kill those heart-selling bastard pigs. For our hearts." Someone yelled and rebels kept firing. We must hold. The leader yelled. Our help will be here. Minato didn't know what he meant by that, but he knew what he should do now. He was now safe and had the situation, so now he needed to act like he was part of this. If this is a small skirmish, what the hell does it need to be ranked as a battle? He muttered as he set his blaster to the stunning. He might be on a mission where he needed to act like a rebel, but he would never betray his Jedi heart. Killing was against the code. So he raised the blaster and started firing. Minato was a good fighter but also an amazing shot. With one hand, he managed to stun a whole squad before they had chance to retaliate. Then enemy soldiers saw his position and started heavily fire at him. Minato hid behind the corner again, waited patiently. When he sat there, looking at the sky, it was full of smoke and fumes from the battling city. He could hear battles being fought in the distance. I guess we were a bit late. He muttered as the civil war had obviously started. And somehow he was in the front lines, trying best to stay true to his heart and to his mission. And who said that this mission would be boring? He did himself, but luckily no one was around to remind him that. He felt the blasts quieting down and he repeated his own firing process. His own position was actually further ahead than the rest of the rebels who had gathered around the crashed spaceship. They were being pushed back inside. He saw how the leader tried to guide his troops best he could so he could win, but when the majority was kids and wounded, it wasn't easy and they were being pushed back hard. Minato saw that even tanks weren't used anymore. The enemy leader must have realized how futile it would be to use them. Then he saw from his hiding place how a squad of soldiers was climbing by the wall, trying to leap over the ship and into their rear. No one else had noticed that because of his hiding place. He couldn't allow that, so he decided to climb after them. Sticking his blaster inside his pants, he started climbing. The corner he had been hiding in went all the way to the roof. His fingers found their ways into the cracks of the wall as he kept climbing. In the distance, he could hear someone calling for him. He presumed it was him because the voice called for the kid. What are you doing? The spaceport was a tall building covered by a GL roof. He just kept climbing higher on the wall until he was on the roof. Then, he used the blaster to break a hole into the window. Sharp shards of GL fell over him and he tried to cover his face. Then, leaping from the hole, he landed on the windy roof. The ship was now directly under him and the squads of soldiers were preparing to ambush their target. Making sure that his gun was on the stunner, he swiftly made it right behind the soldiers. He started firing stunning shots at the backs of the soldiers who fell as he stunned them, starting with officers. Captain first, who yelled as he fell down. 2 sergeants at his side who had managed to glance over their shoulders. Then another 2 sergeants and finally 2 soldiers. He had almost taken out 2 whole squads of professional soldiers before they realized to fire back. Minato leapt into cover behind some pole and reloaded his weapon. As he waited for a chance to attack again and finish the remaining 2 squads, he soon realized that he had overestimated these guys. They weren't half as good as he had expected. They had brand new armor and weapons, but they didn't seem to have any real experience. In fighting, at least. He jumped from his cover, and continued to stun his enemies. These soldiers hadn't even really sought cover. Some had knelt and some were lying low, but no one had moved much from their original formation. These guys really didn't know how to fight without an officer holding their hand. But because he made the elementary level mistake and let his guard down just a little, one of the remaining soldiers managed to fire at him. If Minato hadn't had Force enchanted senses, he might have died, but he managed to use his blaster to cover. His weapon blew up right on his face, throwing him on his back. Soldiers realized what just had happened, laughed confidently as they prepared to finish him. Idiot probably didn't realize he had his gun on stun. One of them laughed as they prepared to execute the boy lying on his back. Die, you rebel filth. Right then red blasts filled the air and 2 remaining squads were minced. Minato rolled on his stomach and saw a group of rebels. And they weren't children or wounded. Nice one, kid. A woman's voice came as the leader of the group came into view, holding a rifle. But don't be a hero. We need people like you to live so we can save this world. The native Jiraran smiled to him as 2 more helped him to his back. Take it easy, we will take it from here. Minato grinned in pain but stayed vigilant. The leading woman, or girl. She wasn't much older than Minato himself, had brown hair which she had tied into twin buns, took her rifle and scoped the battlefield. Tenten, all squads are on place. Someone yelled. The girl nodded and raised her hand, she was holding a spear. Then she pointed the spear at the enemy. Charge! She let out a primitive roar and jumped off the roof. Taking advantage of the designs of the buildings, she guided her fall with her hands and tail. Other natives followed her lead. Minato saw how humans took rifles and started firing at the enemy positions. He slowly stood up and looked around the port. On all the roofs, people had started fighting and rebels had suddenly surrounded the enemy, giving them some hard time. Minato had to admit that he was impressed, as a person who actually enjoyed reading war history could see some real tactics being used here. He had now a good look at the city. It was around with 7 main streets that all lead to the terminal and back to the edges of the city. These streets were now occupied by royalists and their old tanks and soldiers. On the roofs, rebels had appeared, ambushing them. But Minato realized something else. Only people who had used the frigate had new weapons. Others, like men who were firing next to him, had some old hunting rifles and old guns. Another question he needed an answer. So from the high place he was now, he could follow how the battle as the rebels took control of their capital. Minato was impressed of their ability to push back the royal army who had better equipment and training. When the royal army had been pushed back almost completely, another trap was sprung. A cavalry riding bird-like creatures came from behind the corners, slaying enemies with their spears and jumping onto tanks. Royalists were broken after couple runs and abandoned any kind of formation or order and started running in panic. The day was for the rebels, but for what price? Minato thought sadly as his Jedi heart saw the devastation left in the city and its people. And how many children lie dead? What about wounded? Or soldiers of the royal army? Rebels didn't seem to mind because many stood up, holding their weapons, yelling victory cries. War really was something completely new to him. The rebel main force armed themselves with weapons from the crashed frigate and rode away with those bird creatures securing the premises. Leaders gathered around, encouraging fighters and helping to tend wounded. Minato himself tried to stay out of anyone's way and keep his eye on them. That girl, Tenten was it, her name was especially interesting. And not just because she had a killer body under that cloak of hers, but also, there was something else. He couldn't explain it any better except that he had a feeling. He searched for her now. Hiya, newbie. He jumped in the air and turned around to see that girl smiling at him. I'm glad you're back on your feet and kicking. Minato nodded back warily. There were only a handful of people who were able to sneak behind him like that. Dooku had always been one. And he was the only exception Minato could live with. The girl was lucky Minato had been forced to leave his lightsaber with his master. He would have most likely cut her arm off for scaring him like that. She wore typical Jiraran native clothing, the short cloak, and pants, letting her long, strong legs visible. Then she had a light pink cloth wrapped around her chest and blue bandana around her forehead. But she also wore some nice accessories and jewelry. Big earrings which had more rings attached to them. And beautiful necklace around her neck. This girl was important, whoever she was. Her spear was also more skillfully made. Even though blood dripping from the blade of the spear kind of ruined the impression. Or completed the warrior princess look she had going on. She was slim under her clothes. Her body was covered in light fur which didn't cover her front side. Her hand-like legs balanced easily as she jumped from one foot to another. Her tail was waving behind her. I heard from Ganru what you did. That's pretty impressive. She continued, referring to the climbing of the wall rather than defeating couple squads by himself. Some old-fashioned manhood right in Jiraran was climbing. Of course, after humans arrived and started inhabit the planet, some of these old tradition lost their meaning. Or so the archives had explained. Apparently many of the clans held onto these traditions. Minato would have to remind Jocasta knew about this the next time he saw her. She would explode if she found out that her archives were incomplete or incorrect even one syllable. But back on the present matter, he responded by only shrugging back like it was nothing. What's your name? She asked politely, sticking her spear to the ground and leaning into it. Can you speak? She asked jokingly when he didn't answer. Minato was in trouble. In all his preparations, he had forgotten to study his fake identity. And now he was supposed to introduce himself. Based on this girl's actions and from the way she carried herself and her accessories, she was probably a princess of some clan. His ticket to the inner circles. Or he would need to start thinking an exit strategy soon. Damn it. He had completely forgotten even the first rule his master taught him. All that was left for him were falling in love, forgot who he was and get himself killed and everything would be perfect. Tenten was getting impatient and Minato knew his time running out when he saw something behind her. In a tall tower. Something glittering. The malice intent. Sniper. He yelled before he knew it and leapt forward and pushed the girl away just when the sniper pulled the trigger. He had acted so quickly that didn't even realize that he had been shot until he crashed to the ground even though the bullet had gone through his shoulder. He landed on top of the girl he had saved. He could see people raising their rifles and starting to fire at the tower. Then the pain was getting too much and he had to close his eyes. Funny. He whispered. I always wished that I would die on top of a pretty girl. Then it became dark. He could hear that girl yelling into his ear but he couldn't hear anything anymore. He woke up in a dimly lit room, in a bed. He slowly sat up, pushing the covers aside. He didn't make a sound when he looked around the room which was comfortably furnished. He saw his belongings on the table near to the bed. He stood up carelessly, forgetting the hole in his shoulder. When he tried to stand up, the slashing pain went across his chest. He clutched his shoulder and had to bite his lip so he wouldn't scream like a girl. Then he remembered that he had been shot. He glanced at his shoulder. It was wrapped in bandages. Rebels must have treated his wound as he gently felt through the wrappings. He didn't feel the hole, which meant it was healing nicely with the help of some little bacta they had brought with the frigate. He still couldn't use his arm for a day or two probably. He lifted his leg to the floor and slowly stood up, careful not to move his shoulder. Taking his shirt from his bag, he made his way to the doorway. When it wasn't locked, he opened it. He was in the middle of a forest, high in the tree. It was some kind of a village built around this hut. He glanced down. They weren't that high as he had first thought. Approximately 10 to 20 meters high in the air. One hut around one tree and tree was connected by a rope ladder. In the nearby hut, there were small children playing with each other while some women were doing chores nearby. He heard a bird cry from below and saw a group of those bird creatures that run on 2 feet. They were pacing around in a pack under them. A man was watching over them from a nearby place, holding a rifle leisurely in his hands. There was another village in the ground where more children and women were walking around. So this was a Jiraran colony. Charming. Very charming. But why had he been brought here? He heard steps coming closer and he turned to face them. I'm so glad you're okay. It was Tenten who was approaching with a smile. That royalist cowardly pig would have surely killed me, if you hadn't stepped between and taken the shot for me. She raised her hand in cupping motion. As a daughter of the Ku clan, allow me to formally introduce myself and offer my thanks. I'm Ten Ku, daughter of Chiriku, the true leader of the Jiraran people and our savior. You can call me Tenten. Long as I live, I owe you my life, so to repay this debt, there's nothing I wouldn't do. Please ask me anything. She stopped and waited. It took Minato a moment to realize that he was expected to do something. So, playing his luck, he repeated the hand gesture and took a hold of her hand and nodded. It was nothing. So you can speak. She nodded approvingly and let his hand go. I was starting to wonder if you could only say a word like, sniper. She giggled. So, what's your name? You still haven't told me that. Minato felt like hitting himself into guts. Why couldn't he just take few minutes right now and read his new identity? He would have to improvise. Minato. He would have to use his own name. Minato Namikaze. Well, Minato Namikaze, I thank you, and if you can, would like to bring to a dinner now. If you can walk. Minato nodded. Sure. Tenten lead him to another hut which was full of people, laughing and signing, and she introduced him to everyone. He got a hero's reception as he sat down. Well, he had managed to infiltrate the rebel base. What now? Part 3. A group of royalist soldiers rode their beacons, heading towards the forest in the distance, keeping their eyes open for any possible rebel sightings. The mounds around them gave them some cover. It was quiet, only some wildlife of the planet but nothing else. No rebels, no farmers, no clans, no nothing. No wonder really. Everyone on this area was somehow part of the rebellion or aiding them. So all the possible habitation was deserted in fear of the retaliation. No one was around. Well, there was someone besides them. Had they been a slightly more vigilant, they would have noticed slight movement on a hill, among the bushes. So, a squad heading towards east. The voice mumbled to itself as it backed away from the bushes carefully not to arouse any attention. Minato held a communicator. Tenten, it's me. Their scouts are heading straight towards you. The old communicator had some statics before he could clearly hear the voice. Minato, do they know our location? Tenten asked worriedly. I don't think so. From the way they pace, I would say that they are just scouting. Okay. Then, remain your post and inform if you see anything else. Over and out. The link was cut off. Minato did as he was told and lied down inside the bushes or his small camp. It was roughly 4 days since he had taken the bullet for the warrior princess, and Minato had a pretty good idea what was what on this planet. First, the reasons of the civil disorder. It appeared that for some time now, the leader of the opposition Chiriku had accused the royal house for corruption and for fixing the election for their representative in the Galactic Senate. According to rebels, King's younger brother wasn't half as popular as the votes claimed him to be. King denied such rumors to be preposterous. Rebels also argued that their own governing body was just a hoax, as they had not been able to pass any laws without the royal house interfering. Then, the king had passed laws that had started to criminate old traditions and rights such as the manhood right of certain clans. Then some clans had been denied their place in the council because they refused to accept those laws. Soon they had started throwing people into prisons, and some clans had even been denied their rights of their citizenship, mainly those clans that followed Chiriku. To make matters worse, King had started selling their sacred forests. Jiraran sacred trees had become very popular material in the galaxy for their unique attributes. People had gotten really angry. Then, to make matters ready to explode, Chiriku had been caught and thrown into prison just a week before Minato's arrival. That had started the war, and it didn't seem to slow down. Minato couldn't believe the Senate had allowed a world it was supposed to hold in great importance, for some reason, to fall into such state. He himself was still waiting for his arm to fully heal. It had healed nicely since the shooting, and it had been like a ticket into rebels' camp. It had also given him an excuse why he couldn't join in fights. When he had been asked about what he could do, he had shrugged and said he was a hunter's son. It was stretching the truth a bit, but hey. Who knows what his parents did? Tenten had been excited and offered him a job as a scout. It was easy job and didn't take much moving. Long as he could subdue a beacon to ride on, he was practically a member of a clan. Of course this wasn't even a challenge to the boy. So for the past days, he had been riding around randomly, trying to get himself acquainted with his surroundings, spotting royal scouts and informing them to Tenten, who was always happy to hear his voice. And by the end of the day, he would return back to the village where he would hear about more and more conflicts around the world. So he had a general idea why he was here. All he needed to do now was to wait that his master would contact him and they could finally put an end to this. When he raised his binoculars once again and scanned around the hill, he really couldn't complain about the peace and quiet for once in a while. It was a rare commodity in the temple that was full of people everywhere. As he couldn't see anyone, not rebels or soldiers, he leaned back in the bushes and yawned. When was the last time he had been quiet like this? Normally he would have gone on rampage 10 times already, but he understood that on a mission, he couldn't do anything. Not when it was serious like this. He had seen the amount of wounded one day when refugees had started move past their village. They would go through the village and disappear into the woods behind that, hoping that they would be safe there. It appears that soldiers believed that if someone didn't know about the location of the rebels, they were concealing information and didn't bother look more into it. They had started harrying people relentlessly. The rebellion was gaining support among the clans. But people in the cities still believed in their king. That much he knew from the way soldiers were willing to throw their lives for him. He checked his watch. It was about time to check in and say all was well when saw something in the corner of his eye. He raised his binoculars quickly and looked directly into that direction. Yep. It was the Royal Army. Approximately 2 battalions. With tanks. And some Beacon cavalry. They were much more heavily armed than Minato had seen before. Here we go again, he muttered as he raised his communicator. Scout 4 to base. Scout 4 to base. Tenten picked it up immediately. Report. Scout 4. This is base. How many? She knew to ask because he didn't use that formal speech expect in one case. At least 2 battalions. Tanks and cavalry. Heading straight towards you. Waiting for orders. There was a moment of silence. How long until they reach the base? Roughly 6 hours at their current pace. Minato answered when he noticed that there were something happening in the group. Stand by. There's something happening out there. What? Minato, tell me. Minato looked at with his binoculars. The enemy was dividing. Cavalry seemed to charge into another direction. Riders are leaving the main group. They are heading towards east-southeast at fast pace. That's where we sent the refugees. Tenten screamed into her communicator. Those bastards. They are going to raid them. He heard some enraged screams from the background until Tenten shushed them. Is there any changes in the main group? Minato looked. They didn't seem to be any other changes. They seemed to be heading towards the base at same speed. No, he said finally. Something didn't add right. Okay. Minato, stay on them. We will save the refugees and then we'll come and destroy them. Don't do anything stupid, okay? Why? Minato asked before he could stop himself. Would you be heartbroken if your love would die before you got a chance to confess your feelings to him? Don't joke like that. She stuttered into her communicator. Anyway, don't do anything stupid. Understood, warrior. He could hear her blushing when she closed the communication link. Damn, I'm good. Minato muttered to himself as he tugged his own communicator into his shirt. I haven't even really been with her and she is head over heels in love with me. That's what happens when you save a girl's life. He jumped and screamed like a little girl. Shut up, you stupid Padawan. Jiraiya pressed his hand over his mouth. What the hell do you think you're doing? Master, what are you doing here? Then he noticed how he had dressed. It reminded him of a bounty hunter. Master, he asked again, this time more seriously. I'm Orochimaru, now. He explained. I got together with few bounty hunters from Outer Rim. Luckily I was able to get in. Some person paid a hefty sum to gather all kind of scum to this place. So I hanged along. He glanced around. But I have to say I'm disappointed. I only half covered my presence and I could sneak on you like this. Well, sorry. Minato muttered angrily. Anyway, how did you know that I saved her and what does it has to do with anything? First things first. Love. Jiraiya nodded firmly. I happen to know that Jiraran clans carry on the warrior culture. Like in other worlds, strong are respected and weak are despised. But their traditions come from the time before humans. Like any warrior culture, they had their rights and customs. Like, climbing a wall was a page to manhood. Riding a beacon was a sign of hunter. And defeating an enemy a sign of a warrior. Of course there were hundreds of these things and I only know what Guy told me. Anyway, they also have the life debt, like in many worlds. When I save someone's life, they believe they have to devote their life to repay that debt. Exactly. Jiraiya nodded. Now how this all wraps around this case, is that when you or Tamanakaru saved that princess, you proved yourself to be a better warrior than her. So, what does that has to do with her feelings to me? Jiraiya grinned. Did I forget that in this world, men courted women by defeating them in duel? Minato face faulted. So that's, but when she will, and these last days, ooh crap. Maiden's heart is like uncharted space. The old master laughed. That's some mess you got yourself in, Tamanakaru. Minato. He corrected. What? I didn't get a chance to study that profile so I had to improvise. Jiraiya slapped his face. You're such an idiot, he muttered through his hand. Anyway, let's keep girls out of this for a while. How did you know that I saved her? Because it was one of our bounty hunters that tried to kill her. Guy told us how some brat pushed you aside and saved you. Our client paid some extra if she were to die. For some other rebel leaders as well. Jiraiya nodded. So, it was the king who hired you? Nope. Jiraiya shook his head and looked at the nearing colony. Because, we also have a hunt list of Jiraran council men and the royal family itself. Some of the guys are really excited. This may be a surprise but many of them are Jiraran exiles. Minato nodded understanding the picture. So, who is the client? Who would benefit from this? I don't know. But I do know that this has many levels. Minato, always look underneath, the underneath. There is no logic here. Minato ruffled his hair. It was like, somebody would want to kill everyone. Jiraiya froze. What? You might have something there. I have to look into it. Jiraiya nodded. Anyway, I came here for some other reason than just to check on you. Really? Padawan looked suspiciously. What? Jiraiya raised his finger. First, you have been found by the army before you found them. What? How? The master nodded at the colony. One of the transports has some nice toys in them and full of bloodthirsty bounty hunter. They picked up the signal from your communicator. They were able to deduce your location on this hill. They wanted you spot them, inform your friends and see them riding towards the refugee camp. Then, they wanted you to disappear into night. Now that your warriors are heading to save the refugees, they will speed up towards your camp the moment I report that you're dead. So you volunteered to deal with me. How sweet. Well, I and 3 other guys. You did pretty amazing to kill of 3 of my friends and knock me out before you run away. 3 other guys? Minato asked. Jiraiya handed over a bag. 3 right hands of 3 bounty hunters. He explained. Trophies. For your girl. Then you can begin to think your marriage vows. Not that I don't appreciate this. Minato cleared his throat. But, he thought about the Jedi code and his current situation and all that. It was so confusing. You're still concerned if it's right to kill, right? Minato looked up before nodding. I've killed, you know that. But especially during this mission I've seen so much death and I think, I'm a Jedi, I can't kill, but if I don't, This guy might kill me or someone else. And all that. He looked away quietly. Even though this is not a place or time for this kind of talk, I understand. Jiraiya nodded and smiled to him. I think that you have to decide yourself what is right and is wrong. Even though I shouldn't say this, there is only one person you should never betray. He poked his chest. Yourself. When the time comes, you know what you should do. Don't think as a Jedi. Think as yourself. Minato raised an eyebrow. Are you openly telling me to ignore the Jedi code? Jiraiya sighed sadly. Let's just say that I learn from my mistakes. And Minato, I know that you will do great things. Just try to stay on the right path. Being a Jedi might not be for you. Not every Padawan is cut for a Jedi. You remember that I had one Padawan before you. I heard some stories. Minato nodded. They don't speak much about it in the temple. I feel like I made a mistake with him. Jiraiya sighed and kept his eyes on the colony. It was getting closer and closer slowly but sturdily. I tried to force him my own ideals. And when the time came, I failed him. He gulped but smirked proudly at Minato. So I decided not to make the same mistake with you. As your master, I hope you became a great Jedi, but as someone who has practically raised you for years, I just wish that you became happy. Perhaps this will help me to pay my debt. Happy. Minato stood there for a moment. Are you dying or something? What's with the mood over here? We're in the middle of a mission, the enemy getting closer every second and you go all mushy on me. Jiraiya didn't wish to tell him, but he had bad feeling growing inside him by the day during this mission. He felt like their time was ending. He needed to teach this boy so much yet he felt like there was so little time. You're right. He nodded firmly. Take this to your princess, my stupid apprentice, and tell her what you know. That there were bounty hunters running around. Exactly. Then he suddenly took a knife from his belt and threw a knife to him. Do me. What? One man returns unharmed when 3 other guys are dead. Doesn't take a genius to see a flaw in that idea. Jiraiya nodded. You need to make me believable. Can you do that? Minato looked at the gruesome knife in his hand, revealed a feral smirk. With pleasure. What about the Jedi? The man asked and slurped some noodles. Like in one mind, all people quickly stood out of the way, giving this man a clear look on the hologram table. The first Nemodian cleared its throat. The Jedi and remaining of their forces have gathered here. An area flashed red showing the ruins of an alt ship. We have that area surrounded by our forces and we outnumber them severely. They have nowhere to go nor any means to escape. Naruto nodded. Good. But stay on your guard. Never underestimate a Jedi. They are tricky. He looked at the board. He had arrived in Hypori 2 days ago and taken the title of Commander on the field, even though he was only an observer and only thing he had to do was look at the halberd and make sure that Grievous didn't kill himself, yet. That maniac needed to be dealt with someday. He was a loose cannon. He didn't really bother himself with the battle of today. It had been 2 days since he had last heard of his apprentice and he was getting worried. Maybe something had happened. He sighed. Being a master wasn't easy. He finished dining and stood up. Are they done? Yes. It seems that the last of their troops have been destroyed. Jedi have pulled back. Good. Naruto walked to the door. Come. I need you. The droid flinched before quickly hurrying after him. Right away, Master. You're going, my lord? Nemodian asked. I want to see their fall myself. Naruto answered as he and his protocol droid exited the room. They took a speeder to the battlefield, to the crash-landed alt ship that was surrounded by super battle droids. Naruto could feel the presences of many masters inside. Especially one familiar. The droid landed him next to a caped figure in the middle of the army that turned to look at him. What do you want? This is my battle, Cyborg General demanded. And I know that. I'm here only to observe when you kill the Jedi. He answered. That is, if you're able. AD watched between the two hastily when the Grievous huffed angrily and turned to face the alt ship. Do not try to intervene, smuggler. He head out. What's the situation? He asked from a super battle droid nearest to them. General has just issued the warning after killing a Jedi that tried to call for reinforcements. The droid pointed at the corpse of Dakman Barrack. Or what was left of it. A warning. The droid flashed quickly and played a message the cyborg general had just played. After listening it, Naruto nodded. Arrogant piece machine. He muttered and stepped over the corpse and followed after the general. Excuse me, sir. May I ask, where are you going? AD asked and quickly tried to follow him. I believe that's where the Jedi are. I know. Naruto sighed. That's why I'm going there. Oh, but sir, what about General Grievous? He told us not to. Naruto glared over his shoulder but didn't stop. I don't remember that I was anywhere under his authority, was I, Ad? Of course not, sir. The droid answered quickly. I was only trying to point out do you require my services for the moment? No, he snorted. Unless you can hold my lightsaber. I'm afraid that is not part of my programming. Then stay by the speeder and wait for my call. Yes, master. The droid shook its head disapprovingly. I wish he wouldn't be so rude all the time. Inside the ship, 5 Jedis were waiting. Exhausted, both physically and mentally. They had lost their armies and one of their friends' presence had just disappeared and they were about to follow him to the death, with only a slight chance to escape. Even their only way to contact and ask for evacuation was used. They all wished Master Barrack had made it. 2 more Jedis quickly run into their hiding place. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi of the Jedi High Council took a look of the survivors. Unstoppable. He is unstoppable. Whipped Master Kakrunic panted and took a deep breath. Never have we been outmaneuvered by a droid. Female Togruta, another member of Jedi High Council, Shakti added. His strategy is without flaw. Did you find Master Barrack? Female human, Tsunade Senju, Master Healer asked. Her blonde hair was tied to a twin ponytails and she wore a green robes. She was known for her temper. Ki-Adi shook his head and didn't say anything. In another corner, he saw a Twi'lek female, Ayla Sakura, resting. Close to her, leaning back to a wall, Padawan of late Barrack, Shah Gi, young human male was sweating nervously. This is the end. We are doomed. Including his fellow Serene, Tar Ser, there were 7 Jedi who were ready to face their enemies to whatever end. Ki-Adi braced himself. Our predicament is dire indeed. But do not despair. Focus. We are Jedi. He received encouraging smiles and nods from his friends. Jedi. Everyone reacted to the new voice that echoed through the battlefield. They activated their lightsabers and rushed to corners and carefully scanned outsides. You are surrounded, your army is decimated. Make peace with the Force now, for this is your final hour. But know that I, General Grievous, am not completely without mercy. I will grant you a warrior's death. Prepare. It became quiet. Deadly quiet. Then, slowly, a clanking sound could be heard. And with every sound, it became stronger, closer. Every Jedi tried to find the source of the sound. Can't see anything, Tar Ser said as he looked around from a hole. Then he backed away, carefully. That noise, Shakti whispered. He is coming, alone. Ki-Adi-Mundi answered. We can't face him. Young Padawan Shah Gi screamed nervously. We must try, Padawan. Mundi yelled. Remember, there is no death. There is only force. Tsunade said calmingly to the young man who tried to nod. Slowly, everyone backed away from their places, covering each other's backs. The sound kept coming closer and closer. It's close, but where? Tar whispered. It's all around us. Shah yelled. Calm yourselves. Ki-Adi-Mundi tried to calm them. Then it stopped. The footsteps ceased and it became so quiet. Steady. He tried to keep everyone calm. He needed to keep everyone calm. Shah was about to break down. Steady. The Padawan closed his eyes and screamed suddenly, and charged forward. Aaaah. OWH. He let out a sound when he was tackled. Calm down, you brat. Tsunade yelled and grabbed the boy by his collar and threw him back to others so roughly that he probably broke a bone or two. Now is not the time to lose your cool. Sorry, the Padawan mumbled and Tar helped him to stand up. He and Ki-Adi offered the master healer a thankful nod when their eyes widened. Behind you. They tried to warn her. Tsunade twirled around fast as she could, activating her green lightsaber. And not a second's tenth too soon as two lightsabers came out and hit her saber so hard that she was flung back to the other side of the room. Tsunade. Ki-Adi yelled and rushed to her side as others quickly formed a ring around them. The blonde woman coughed and refused the support from him and settled with a wall. I'm okay, she whispered but twitched painfully. Where is he? He is gone. Ayla whispered. Can you fight? Don't get why, kid. She forced her back to straighten out. My morning exercise is harder than this. Ayla smirked. Just don't strain your back, Grandma. Slowly, 7 Jedis formed a circle and calmly made their way through the room, not letting anything to pee by. Padawan Shah was still near the breaking point, but at least he was focused. Had Tsunade not been there, he would have surely been killed by that monster. Every other Jedi was waiting, trying to stay calm under this pressure. But that thing had managed to slip away. And there was no sign of anything. No sound, no sight, no presence. Like he was never there. All that changed when they heard 2 lightsabers being activated right above them. Naruto leapt through the rubble, crawled through holes and in shadows until he finally found the Grievous, hanging from the rooftop, right above the circle of Jedi. He didn't feel like interrupting anything, so he just took comfortable position as possible while hanging from few wires upside down. Just like old times. Then, slowly, he put his hand into his pocket and pulled out a holodisc and pressed a recording button and pointed it at the Jedi. Hino would surely bug him with all the questions. This would save a lot. Grievous made his move. He let go of the roof and landed in the middle of the circle, but not too quickly as everyone managed to jump back. He activated his lightsabers and the fight began. Every one of the 7 Jedis engaged him, but Grievous's unpredictable body and completely new fighting style kept the Jedi on the edge. Naruto dropped the holodisc on the floor to gain better image of surroundings. When the disc hit the floor, it made a sound, causing everyone to jump away from it. Grievous growled and glared up to Naruto's hiding places. What are you doing here? I told you not to intervene. Who is that? Mundi whispered when the shadow figure leaned backwards, onto some edge, like a comfortable seat from which to look at the battle. He doesn't seem to be joining this fight. Shakti whispered as they reformed their defenses. Then she saw Tsunade twitching. What is it? I didn't expect to see you here, brat. The blonde woman cursed. The figure moved slightly, revealing its face from the shadows. Nice to see you too, old hag. Naruto grinned. Still hiding under that face, are you? Jedis looked shocked as they recognized him. Minato Namikaze. Mundi whispered. What are you doing here? Naruto shot a glare at the Serene Elder. None of your business. Then he smirked. But since you're not going to live that long, I'm merely here to observe our newest general in action. Then he glared at the cyborg. Why are they still alive? Grievous growled and retook his stance. Do not dare to intervene. Wouldn't even Dr. Naruto was about to answer when he great force pushing him back, over the edge into the opposite wall. Then the pressure disappeared, and he fell to the ground hard. He barely managed to catch his breath when a blur of green almost cut him into halves. He pushed himself back with very animal-like moves and dodged the attack, made a somersault and landed on his feet. Very great feeling of nostalgia went through his mind when he saw the face of equally angry Tsunade glaring at him, the vein almost exploding in her forehead. This ends now. You still wish to kill me? What? Last time wasn't enough for you? Naruto asked and Tsunade countered by another attack. General had started a fight with 6 other Jedis, leaving Tsunade alone, for now. He wasn't going to let anyone hog his prey, but at the moment, that fool served as a great distraction. If I had known that this were to happen, I would have been much more thoroughly the last time. She muttered and raised her lightsaber. Naruto used force and his lightsaber appeared out of his sleeve. I agree. You should've. He leapt forward, twirling confusingly, trying to impel Tsunade with one hit. She only took a step back and lowered her saber to a defensive stance and blocked the first attack. Naruto landed behind her, turned around fast, hitting her saber hard. She pulled back again but then took a step forward and tried slash his head off. He ducked and lowered his stance again. Coming from low angles, he jumped and leapt like a damn rat. Tsunade managed to keep him at arm's length, but that was just about it. She was tired and that last blow by Grievous had taken its toll. But their combat was fierce and hard and neither was giving in. They ended in a block and jumped back. I guess you've really done serious training since we last fought. Tsunade smirked. You're almost as good as Sakura without her arms. Excuse me. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Senility really must be getting to you. Tsunade snorted. You know, brat, when others have dealt with that screwdriver of yours, we will take you to the temple and you will explain everything to us. She hardened her gaze. I don't really know about that. He smiled back just when something landed between them. Shah! Tsunade yelled when she recognized the twitching body of a young Padawan. Help me, he whispered and tried to reach for her. Tsunade controlled the urge to dive in and do what she could, but she remembered that she wasn't alone. So what's it's gonna be? Naruto smirked confidently. Save a useless friend or destroy the Sith. She struggled between choices. She glanced at the scene where others were fighting. Or rather, only ones who were still fighting, like Ki-Adi-Mundi and Shakti. Others were gone. Then she locked her eyes at Naruto. Don't worry. I'm not going to intervene. This was supposed to be an observation mission anyway. He put his lightsaber away and stepped back. Why don't you try and save your friends? She didn't take any chances. She used force to pull the wounded Padawan back and started healing, staying fully conscious of every little thing around her. Then, slowly, she tried concentrate more and more on healing. Naruto really stayed out of the fight and didn't make a move. When she felt that Mundi and now Ayla were keeping the mechanic menace in check, she needed to find out. Why are you letting me heal him? She glared up to Naruto, who was leaning to a wall leisurely. He shrugged. You would never understand my reasoning. He turned to face the battle at the side. Besides, what? She demanded. Never mind. He sighed just when Grievous grabbed Ayla by her face with his claws and threw her somewhere into the interiors of the ship. That was unnecessary. He muttered and grieved briefly for the loss of a beautiful Twi'lek woman, then he flinched and looked around in swift panic. Thankfully she wasn't anywhere near, hopefully. She would never let him live it down if she were to find out that he saw another Twi'lekess. Tsunade hadn't noticed this because she was paralyzed from sheer shock. Jedi. 6 Jedis were taken down by a droid. And she was already busy with this Padawan and she couldn't sacrifice one life for another. One life isn't worth 1,000, but neither were 1,000 lives worth one. She bit her lip and forced herself to save the one life she could and trust that they would survive. Ki-Adi-Mundi was only one standing, and she saw that he had lost his lightsaber. Grievous was balancing with 3 sabers, one of them that used to belong to the Serene Elder. She yelled and quickly threw her own lightsaber to him. He needed it more than she did. I thank you. He sighed relieved and as he activated her lightsaber. I need you to take Shah and run away. He narrowed his eyes. I will deal with them. Grievous laughed and Naruto chuckled. Foolish Jedi. The cyborg taunted. You have no escape. None of you has. Prepare to die. There is no death. There is only force. Mundi answered and took the best defensive stance he could. Grievous didn't wait and charged at the serene elder. They engaged in fighting and the master started to get a better understanding of this mechanical menace. After a while, however, Naruto sighed and turned around. This is over. Tsunade turned towards him. Might as well head back. He was about to leave when he felt something flying by his ear. He ducked right on time to avoid a kick aimed at his head, and then one who delivered it landed right in front of him, blocking the escape. I will not let you escape, Sith. Female Togruta panted. Shakti had regained consciousness by sheer luck and used what remaining strength she had in her body to hold this man back. Naruto narrowed his eyes. And you think you can hold me, Jedi? Shakti took her stance without any weapon. She was wobbling like GR in the wind. She was barely standing and Naruto could smell blood coming from her. You really think you can beat me like that? He asked, humored. Togruta bit her lip and tried to stand still, but her vision was getting blurry and she could barely connect with anything. Tsunade, she whispered. The blonde healer looked up from her patient. How is he? He is stable for now. She answered and stood up, using force to call forth another lightsaber that was lying in the rubble. It had belonged to the young serene man, but now, it would serve Tsunade. Let's switch, I will finish him. I'm sorry, Shock whispered and collapsed. Naruto didn't even look at her but locked his eyes with Tsunade. So it really is coming down to this. Tsunade didn't answer, activated the blue lightsaber and rushed forward. She slashed and Naruto activated his own. The blades collided and they started fighting like dancing around. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Mundi was being cornered by Grievous. The old man was getting tired but forced himself to stand up another attack and come back for more. He needed to finish this monster for all those Jedi who this thing had killed. This monster should not be allowed to leave the battle, even if it caused his own life. And if by any chance possible, he needed to stay alive long enough so they could finish even bigger threat that this droid general. He could feel his friend and comrade Tsunade engaging the Sith at the other side of the room in a fierce combat. Even if they all had to sacrifice their lives, the Sith needed to be destroyed. For the future generations. For the freedom of the Republic. Then, just one time his hand was clutching to the lightsaber too loosely and Grievous sent it flying across the room. Seeing his chance, Ki-Adi concentrated on the lightsaber, aiming at the Sith on the other end of the room. Back at the other side, Naruto felt how the flying lightsaber nearly cut his head off and he had to bend his back to avoid it. He could feel the warmth radiating from the blade as it missed him by a near inch. Mundi cursed inwardly in defeat when he had to let the lightsaber go and jump back so he wouldn't be killed. He needed to survive. Just a little longer. Force would show him a way. Naruto slowly stood up and saw how Tsunade used force to summon her own lightsaber back to her. Then, she raised both blades and took another stance. I'm sorry that I have to do this. The young man shook his head. So am I. He charged and they engaged another fierce fight. Tsunade's twin blades kept running around and Naruto had to summon all his skill to able to survive. They blocked each other and Naruto had to jump back. Tsunade didn't give him a second to recover but kept pressure on him, all the time. Then, she took one step too much and he managed to trip her with his leg. She fell on her back and Naruto slashed down with both hands, forcing Tsunade onto her back. Funny, Naruto said through his teeth as they struggled. I always dreamed about getting on top of you when I was a kid. Better live your dream now. She yelled back and kicked him into his gut hard and he flew across the room. She jumped onto her feet and saw Naruto lying down on his stomach, unmoving. There was a trace of blood running down his forehead. He must have hit his head when flying back. Slowly, she used force to summon Naruto's lightsaber from him and threw it away. Then, carefully made her way to him. He was lying on the ground, so relaxed that it was painful to watch. Old hag, teach me how you do that backflip. The voice yelled from the past. She fought back tears and raised her lightsaber. I'm sorry, Jiraiya, Minato, Kushina. Her hand fell and the blade came down swiftly. Suddenly, a red blade came through the brown jacket Naruto was wearing, and it impelled right through her shoulder. Her eyes shot wide open in shock. The blade was pulled and she wobbled backwards a step or two. Naruto stood up, eyes closed. What name did you say? He whispered and opened his eyes slowly. When he opened his eyes, Tsunade felt a fear going through her. Not the fear of her own inevitable fate, which had obviously been decided. It was fear for the galaxy. Fear for the Jedi Order. Fear for her own student. Because now, the boy in her memories was gone. In front of her, there was a Sith, strong in the dark side of the Force, surrounded by the dark side. Naruto used force to throw her away and she hit her back to rubble. She dropped her lightsabers and they rolled on the floor. She twitched painfully when brought her hand to her shoulder, trying to ignore the blinding pain. She glared when her enemy slowly walked up to her, eyes flaming red. I asked you, what name did you say? He hissed angrily. Tsunade noticed his weapon. The old design. 3 jewels. That lightsaber, it's Kushina's. She looked away. I guess it's no wonder you hate us so badly. What? Naruto asked. I mean, not many people can just ignore the way their mother was killed. But don't listen to any lies Dooku told you. She was a threat to the galaxy. She needed to be killed. She said, pain in her eyes. Not the pain of her shoulder but the pain of Quilt. Who killed my mother? Naruto asked, his eyes turning more and more flaming. Tsunade could feel his anger raising. The realization hit the wounded master. You don't know. He didn't tell you. Why are you? Naruto used force grip onto her throat. Tell me. Tsunade managed to smirk confidently. Do you really think that I would answer to a threat? Sith thought his options. Fine. He let her go. Then another way, I guess. He pointed his lightsaber at the resting Shah. Tell me. You wouldn't. Minato. You can't do this. Tsunade screamed. I am Naruto, son of the Crimson Devil. One Padawan doesn't mean anything to me. He yelled. You've really fallen so low, she whispered with sad eyes before bracing herself. Kill him. Naruto was slightly confused when he first realized that he was being fired at. He turned around and saw a group of clones. Not just any regulars, but these were different. Their aim was better and their formation was more effective. Back up. He cursed and jumped back first into the shadows where he met fleeing General Grievous. How did they get here? He demanded to know from the cyborg as they pet each other, who only growled an answer. Blaster fire and explosions followed them everywhere. Naruto hid into rubble and quickly climbed the wall. Shoot them down. Shoot them down. Mundi yelled as few clones rushed to help the wounded. Tsunade watched as Naruto's shadow flashed through the rubble, always couple steps ahead the explosions and blasts. Then, Grievous attacked from the other direction, taking out ARC troopers that were on his way. And then Naruto appeared from another corner, making his way through another patch. ARC 77, Fordo, called for backup and their gunship appeared through the wall. Naruto and Grievous pulled back into shadows when they were being fired at. Everyone, get in, Fordo commanded as they loaded the wounded. No, we must pursue. Kiadi yelled, but the ARC trooper stopped him. General, we can't. The survivors will die. Kiadi Mundi nodded, defeated, and quickly jumped on board. Last of the troopers arrived in and the ship flew away. On board, Tsunade was lying on the gurney. Are you all right? He asked from her. I'm fine, she whispered as the sedative took over and she fell asleep. Serene Elder nodded and looked around. What about the others? There were no other survivors. Fordo answered solemnly, nodding at Shakti, Ayla Sakura and Padawan Shah Gi, who were all critical. Others didn't make it. These just might. They escaped Hypori quickly, leaving defeated. On the surface, Grievous was taking his spoils, lightsabers that had once belonged to Jedi. Run, You Jedi. You're only evading the inevitable. I will find you. He glared into distance when he turned to face Naruto, who was glaring back. I told you not to intervene. I do not work for you. Naruto glared back with flaming eyes so hard that even Grievous faltered for a second before bracing himself again. You're just my girlfriend's toy. If my master allows it, I will crush like a bug. After all, he raised his hand and slowly tightened his fingers. Grievous felt something clutching his heart. I know exactly how to deal with you. He turned around and walked away, and the pressure disappeared. Then he stopped and summoned the holodisc he had dropped, which had started this mess. He played something of the played data before putting it away. I need to report to my master immediately. He left the destroyed ship and the raging general. AD. Get over here. Naruto's voice echoed through hollow field. Right here, master. The droid hurried with the speeder. I'm very glad to see you're all right, sir. I hope everything went like planned. Naruto ignored the kiss droid and leaned on his seat. Get me to my ship. I want to be in hyperspace in half an hour. Right away, sir. AD speeded away, through the victorious separatists' forces. When Naruto had enjoyed his food a while back, in Yavin 4, there had been a vicious duel going on. AJJ Ventress had managed to lure her target, Anakin Skywalker, from the battle over Moonlist 10 and bring him back to Yavin 4. There, she had tightened her hands around her lightsabers, promising to make her master proud, and began the fight. It had been fierce battle, going through jungles and temples. They had been very evenly matched. Until one point, she had suddenly lowered her stance and twirled forward. The maneuver shocked Anakin as he had seen it in the past. It was Naruto's Hurricane of Doom. That idiot had the worst naming sense. And by the time he realized it, she slid his hand off. Lucky for him, it was the mechanical hand. He had lost his lightsaber with his arm, and the victory had been certain for the young-in. She could hear her master's praises. But from somewhere, her target summoned strength unlike anything before that moment. She had been thrown into a deep chasm. And now, AJJ was lying on the bottom of the canyon, blinking her eyes. She felt wet. She struggled to raise her head to see that she was lying on a small pond. It was most likely rainwater that had gathered into one place. It had saved her life. But she didn't feel happy at all. She had failed. Her target was alive and probably left the planet already. She had failed, and now she was going to die. Then she noticed something moving in the corner of her eyes. Something was jumping and leaping in the walls like a monkey. It were a group of those commando droids that were scanning the area. Were they to save her or kill her? Then one of them noticed her, and everyone gathered around her. Two of them raised their arms aimed at her and launched cables. They tied her tightly before making more sounds to each other before starting to climb. They reached the temple where she had fallen, but they didn't stop. They continued to carry her towards the main temple, not letting her go. Too injured to try anything, she submitted to her fate, whatever that would be. She saw a ship landed on the platform. It was a small unregistered freighter. Droids carried her in. There she was put on a Bacta tank without anyone making any sounds. At least she wasn't going to be killed, so she allowed herself to be healed. She fell asleep while letting the Bacta do its wonders on her, and didn't even realize that her transport had been entered the hyperspace. While AJJ was being healed, Naruto was lying in the ground, waiting for Tsunade to make her move. Another battle had just taken place. In the ice world of Ilum, in Ilum's system of unknown regions, Luminara and Barris had been there to make a new lightsaber for the apprentice. She had lost her weapon in an accident during her last mission. They had been interrupted when a group of militarized spelunker probe droids entered the temple, in order to destroy it. They had fought back but been trapped inside the temple when the bombs had exploded. Master Yoda had come to the rescue, with the Senator Amidala of Naboo, and they had just seen the hologram displayed by R2-D2 where Count Dooku had ordered the droids to destroy the temple. They had returned to Amidala's ship. They were well on their way towards Coruscant. Barriss had started meditating to calm herself. Luminara and Yoda were having a quick council among themselves of what this attack on the Temple of Ilum meant when Barriss suddenly screamed in pain and held her head. Everyone froze as she fell down, clutching to her head, whimpering. Senator Padme Amidala covered her mouth. Her bodyguard, Captain Typho, stepped back in shock. Droids C-3PO and R2 were stunned. Jedi Master quickly jumped to her side. "What is it, child?" Luminara asked, concerned. "Barriss, are you all right?" She saw how her apprentice was crying tears. He is angry," she whimpered. "I'm losing him. Dark, it's so dark." She stopped when Master Yoda used a forbidden Jedi technique and stunned her. Her eyes went blank and she fell unconscious. "Is she all right?" Amidala hurried to ask. "Was she hurt? Does she need help?" But Luminara shook her head. "What is it? Know something of this?" "You do, Master Luminara?" Yoda asked. "Talk later. Take care of Padawan first, we should." They carried her gently to a small medical station in the ship. After a medical droid was instructed to look after her and keep her sedated, others returned to Senator's cabin and everyone waited for Master Luminara to explain herself. "Explain, would you, Master Luminara?" Yoda encouraged her. Luminara collected her thoughts before nodding firmly. "It was Minato Namikaze." "Who?" Amidala asked, confused. The name was somewhat familiar, but she couldn't point her finger to it. Yoda's face darkened as if he had expected this. "Feared so, I did." He turned towards the senator. "Minato Namikaze, a fallen Jedi he is. Turned to the dark side he has. Deep within dark he is." "But how?" she tried to ask, but Luminara interrupted her. When Barriss was still a youngling at the temple, she had a friend who she shared everything with. They were very close and good friends. She explained. That friend's name was Minato Namikaze. The fallen Jedi. Grew up close, they did. Yoda continued. Younglings together, Padawans together. Many things they shared. Deep connection. Minato Namikaze was a Padawan of Master Jiraiya. Luminara spoke again. He had an excellent future in the Order until he killed Senator of Jiraran. That's it. Amidala understood. I remember that. It happened almost 4 years ago. A senator was killed in his own office by a Jedi in the presence of the 5 other Jedi and dozens of witnesses. They failed to apprehend the culprit who escaped. She looked at the door. I had no idea she used to be a friend with him. So, what happened? For months, he run. Then for another 3 years, heard nothing of him. Dead we presumed. Master Kenobi and his Padawan said in explosion he died. Anakin did. I mean, you said that it was Master Kenobi and his Padawan, Anakin Skywalker. She cursed her slip and hoped it went unnoticed. Master Jedis ignored the slip and nodded. Then, we saw him, on Geonosis. Luminara explained. He had been there, with Dooku on that balcony watching as many Jedi died. I confronted him later that day, but he denied any connection to him. Again he managed to escape. Padme was shocked. He had been there, watching as she and Anakin and Obi-Wan had struggled for their lives. Before she could say anything, Marillion Master continued. Then, weeks later, he resurfaced again. This time on Naboo. Padme's eyes shot wide open. Yes, on your planet. In that some remote city where had met his contact. A purple Twi'lekes. We don't know much about her, expect her first name, Hina. Anyway, Padawan Inuzuka fought him but was defeated. He survived. His former master, Jiraiya, was there, but we don't know where he was at the time. He just said that he came looking for the Padawan when he found him, unconscious in a hangar. Minato Namikaze, or Naruto Uzumaki like he calls himself today, was gone. Seen him since then, have we not? Yoda ended with shaking his head. Many rumors, heard we have. Hard to find the truth is. Padme nodded, understanding yet slightly confused. What this has to do with what just happened? Strong connection, they shares. Yoda explained. Very strong. She can sense him. Luminara tried to clarify. His anger, sadness, hatred. When he feels really strongly, she can feel it too. So when she just now collapsed, Minato Namikaze must have done something again. She said something about darkness. Padme asked. What does that mean? Luminara and Yoda shared a look. We don't know. Dark side holds many secrets. This Minato or Naruto, whatever he calls himself, is he really in league with Dooku? Padme asked. Yoda closed his eyes. In temple, when both of them were, deep bond the two shared. Like a father and son. Minato lost in darkness. For Dooku to manipulate him difficult would be not. He remembered the rumors that were surrounding the young boy. That he were a Sith. Not speak openly of this, we must ask you, Senator. Of course. I won't say anything. Padme hurried to promise. What are you planning to do with then, if he is with Dooku? If indeed fallen he has, not many options remain. Yoda answered. Destroy the Sith we must. Is it done? Dooku asked. Yes, my master. Naruto bowed to the hologram and pulled the disc and displayed what it had recorded. I've installed his fight here. There were some complications but everything went smoothly. He was on his ship, heading out. Good. The old man nodded. I've just received a word from Yavin 4. Naruto raised his head. Your student failed. I was afraid of that, Naruto muttered. I take full responsibility for her failure and so presume the task of killing Anakin Skywalker. No need. Dooku interrupted him. I need you for other matters. Naruto sighed. So I was right all along. Pardon. Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly. I thought it was strange. For me to find an in instead of dealing with him myself. True. I might hesitate but you insisted that my apprentice would do this instead of me. He glared at Dooku's hologram. You never wanted Skywalker to die, did you? Very perspective of you, son. Exactly like you said. He nodded. My master has further plans concerning the young Skywalker and your apprentice played the first part in that. How is she? Alive. I've placed her into a Bacta tank to recover. She will be just fine. Naruto nodded. Anything else you would like to discuss, son? It's about your general. I don't think we should rely on him. I don't trust him. Dooku raised an eyebrow. He is reckless, angry, crazy, doesn't understand authority and further, I don't like the reason he joined us. You know about the bomb? Naruto nodded. Naruto, sometimes, during difficult times, we must do what is necessary to gain an advantage in war. I don't like it any more than you do but we need him. To do what is necessary, Naruto whispered before giving out a small nod. As you wish. Enough about that, I need you somewhere else now. Naruto bowed his head slowly. Whatever you wish, my master. Back on Coruscant, in the Jedi Temple, white-haired man walked through corridors, heading towards the medical facilities. As he got nearer he hastened his pace. Master Jiraiya, what a surprise. Master Windu said with a flat voice as he entered the room where the survivors of Hypori lied. Jiraiya looked around. Master Shakti and Ayla Sakura were in Bacta tanks like some Padawan. Ki-Adi Mundi was sitting on a bed, his body being checked by Sakura. On the opposite side of the room, his oldest friend Tsunade was lying on a gurney, breathing heavily but her eyes were open and clear. Masters Windu and Fisto were standing in the middle of the room. Even hologram of Obi-Wan Kenobi was there. Everyone turned to face Jiraiya when he entered the room. Glad to see that I'm expected. He muttered back and walked next to his friend. Getting your whopped by some brat, Tsunade. Age catching up on you. She glared with flaming eyes up to his and he chuckled. She survives. Then he noticed the bandage over her shoulder and his face darkened. I presume that this gathering wasn't about celebrating survivors. Hardly. Windu said. We are here to talk about what we just learned. The rumors of your former Padawan being the second Sith are true. I knew that, Jiraiya stated simply, shocking everyone. He shrugged. I know these things. Before the council will officially commence, we must decide the course of action. With this new droid general in Namikaze in the front lines, the war is quickly changing its shape again, and unfortunately to our enemy's advantage. Kenobi pointed out. Not hurry, we can. Everyone turned around and saw how Yoda, Luminara and Barriss walked in. Arrived just we have. Heard of this new predicament we did. Think on this we must. Sakura, who had been mostly doing what she could with minor injuries Kiadi had sustained, noticed that Barriss was somewhat paler than usually and her appearance lacked the usual confidence and grace. Do you need any help? The Marillion healer asked from her friend like nothing wrong. No, thank you. Sakura smiled quietly as Masters restarted the discussion. What about you? Have you heard? She stopped awkwardly. Barriss gulped quickly and nodded. Everything all right, child? Mundi asked suddenly as he stood up. Thank you, Sakura. You can return to your master now. Sakura bowed her head before quickly pacing around the room to the woman lying on the gurney. Master Luminara was standing next to it with somewhat smug smile on her face while the discussion had paused for somewhat private talks while Kenobi had been called away suddenly for post-invasion plans. Tsunade and Luminara collided often among themselves due some unfinished business, and seeing her old master lying there helpless really made Luminara feel good about herself. That looks painful, master. She said finally. Tsunade's flaming eyes seemed to turn into suns when she glared up to her former Padawan. You shouldn't strain yourself. Luminara continued as she firmly pressed Tsunade down. Patients should just wait patiently until they are completely healed. Straining yourself before you're fully healed could create permanent damage. Tsunade growled something into her breathing mask which remained unheard and was probably the best. Then she seemed to huff and turned her eyes towards Barriss, who kept herself busy by studying the Shak Tiz, Ayla's and Shah's healing plans as they were inside the Bacta tanks. She is handling it, master. Do not worry yourself with my student. Luminara nodded. Tsunade rolled her eyes. Kenobi reappeared as the hologram, and he wasn't alone. How's your hand, Skywalker? Windu asked from the Padawan who had joined his master for the meeting. He still lacked an arm. It will be fine soon as I get some spare parts for a new one. Skywalker smirked confidently. What happened to him? Luminara asked, turning to face the hologram. A dark inn, Kenobi answered. Possibly one of Dooku's acolytes. Anakin was able to defeat her, but with the cost of his arm. Luckily, it wasn't the healthy one. Master smiled to his Padawan's annoyance. More and more enemies, this war reveals. Yoda sighed. What should we do then? We can't let Siths to run havoc in the galaxy any longer. Ki-Adi-Mundi said the question in everyone's mind out loud. Barriss, who appeared to be concentrating on reading Ayla's information, was holding her breath without even realizing it. Jiraiya sighed. I happen to know something that will happen soon, and I happen to know that Minato will be there himself. I can go there and deal with him myself. What are you talking about? Windu asked, narrowing his eyes suspiciously. I can't really say. Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. But I can hear you, I know where he will be and when. So I will take responsibility for my student. Everyone looked at the white-haired master, who kept his firm stance under their hard eyes. He knows. Everyone turned quickly towards Tsunade, who had removed her mask. Has passed. She took a deep breath from the mask. Master, you should strain yourself. Sakura hurried to press her down, but Tsunade pushed her aside and took the mask off again. Carrie's, Kushina's, saber, she finished and took the mask back to her face. Masters Yoda, Mundi, Windu and Luminara were all shocked. Others looked around puzzled. Jiraiya only sighed. I figured Dooku would do that. Who is Kushina? A Sith? Barris hurried to ask. Minato's mother. Luminara explained sadly, shocking those who had been puzzled. Years ago, when I was still a Padawan, there was a dark Jedi in the Outer Rim, Kushina Uzumaki, who was forming a rebellion very similar to the Separatists. Nobody knew where she came from or where she learned her skills. Some of us even believed that she indeed was a Sith. By any chance are you referring to Crimson Devil? Obi-Wan asked, and after an approving nod, he nodded. I heard of it when I was training with Master Guiquin. I believe it was very close of turning into a civil war back then. Very close, indeed. Mace Windu nodded. The council sent a group of Jedi to investigate. Among them were Master Tsunade and her Padawan, Luminara, and Jiraiya with his Padawan and several others. I too was among them. Not many returned alive, but we managed to do what we failed to do in Geonosis and avoided a war. The main architect of that rebellion, Kushina, escaped with a traitorous Jedi and weren't found until few years later when she was slain. He glared at Jiraiya. I didn't know she had a son. Did you by any chance? Jiraiya shrugged nonchalantly. The past intentions or actions shouldn't affect on our current decision. He stated simply. No, I didn't know that she had a son, but of course I knew he was hers. I knew it from the very first time that idiot crashed into me. They looked exactly the same. Then he snorted. They even acted the same. And had the same accent of and pronunciation. They were so similar in so many ways that I didn't actually think it was possible for anyone not to see the connection. I guess I was wrong in there. But what does this have to do with anything? Sakura asked carefully, not wanting to disturb Master's discussion. So he carries his mother's lightsaber. It's not like she can help him anymore, right? No. Mundi agreed sadly. But it's probably the way Dooku brought young Minato to the dark side in the first place. You see, his both parents were killed by the same Jedi when he himself was very young, obviously. Who? Barris asked quietly when Jiraiya suddenly turned around and started walking away. Me. He stated simply. I guess I get to finish the whole set. First the father, then mother, and finally the son. He left the medical quarters with a stunning silence. Jiraiya walked to the landing bay in his own space shuttle. He jumped on board and sighed. Jiraiya. Wait. He looked from his pit when Kit Fisto hurried to his own shuttle. Then Jiraiya's communication flashed. So, where are we going? What? Jiraiya asked. We decided that this mission is too important for us to risk it. So like it or not, I'm coming too. His fellow council member laughed as their shuttles left the temple. Jiraiya sighed. Fine. He hardened his glare. Link your navigation computer with mine. Good. Good. Very good. Dooku complimented when Naruto's saber almost cut his head off. Then he stepped back and blocked another attack. You've nearly mastered the second form of lightsaber combat. He said tightly when they struggled in the block. Yes, but. He pushed him back and Naruto felt force going through him. He was slammed to an opposite wall. You're not quite there yet. Naruto panted as he forcibly stood up. Pant pant again, pant pant. Dooku chuckled. Then, take your stance. He lowered his lightsaber pointing downwards. The opening stance of Makashi, the second form lightsaber combat. Naruto took one final breath and stood up straight and copied the stance. He didn't use his own style today. Bo. Dooku said loudly so the training room echoed. They bowed to each other. Ready. Go. They both stepped forward and twirled around, their lightsabers meeting in the middle. This wasn't a fight. This was a duel. Gentlemen's spar. They fought and slowly, Dooku got more serious, brining his apprentice with him little further every time. Makashi was different from other styles because it was designed specifically for lightsaber duels unlike other styles. Dooku had seen it fit to teach it to Naruto, who with great skill had only mastered two styles. The first, Shicho, and the last, Vaipad, before creating his own style. Slowly, Dooku forced Naruto to back until he hit the wall. Naruto dodged the attack by rolling on the wall, Dooku's lightsaber following him close. Then, Dooku suddenly pressed his foot on his and he fell down. The master pointed his lightsaber at the apprentice's neck. I've lost. Naruto panted and relaxed his body and let everything go. Damn it, I don't seem to get any closer in defeating you. Dooku laughed. Patience, boy, your skills are growing. Today you are stronger than yesterday and tomorrow you will be stronger and today. Do not measure your skills against others but yourself. Naruto quickly stood up and bowed. Thank you for the lesson, master. Dooku nodded approvingly. He exited the training room inside the separatist cruiser and Naruto followed him. You have great skill. Probably one of best fencers what the galaxy has seen in a long time. He smiled encouraging as they paced through the hallways. Droids were running around wildly, doing their chores. But you still lack training. Your own style serves you well, but be certain that no style is stronger than the other. It's the man standing behind the saber that counts. Yes, master. Naruto nodded. In my duel with Tsunade I realized just how immature my own style yet is. Yes. It's vital for a warrior to see his own limitations. Dooku agreed. Your style relies on your superior speed, animal-like agility and reflexes without having any actual form. Expect your basic stance. I can see much taken from all of the styles without you mastering any of them. Expect Shicho and Vapad. Naruto, to be able to truly serve a Jedi master in combat, you must study all these style and master them. Naruto nodded. That's why I asked you to teach me Makashi. Yes. Dooku nodded proudly. And you catch on very quickly. Just like I did at your age. Naruto smiled happily for the praise. They entered another great hall where another fight was taking place. AJJ Ventress was being targeted by a group of newly designed prototype of Magnaguard armed with electrostaffs. She is in high spirit. Dooku said slowly as Ventress used force to crush one of her opponents. Ever since her defeat, my apprentice has sworn for revenge against Skywalker. Good. That hatred can be very useful in further campaigns. He turned around. I will send her to a mission on Naboo with Durg. They left the room. If you have no further plans with her, she needs to face herself before she can advance any further. When she is ready,